Hey there, welcome to LC Yoga. My name is Laura, and today we're working on flexibility in yoga. It's a workshop, not a flow class, so we're going to get really detailed into how to stretch well to bring more flexibility. So if you're ready, get on your mat, and I'll meet you there. We'll begin today in seated. So we're not going to do a flow class, we're just going to run through some poses. But go ahead and have a seat. You're going to stick your right leg out in front of you and bring the bottom of your left foot to the inside of your right thigh. So you're in Janu Shirshasana, right? One-legged stretch. Now, most of the time when someone goes into this stretch, especially if they're a beginner, they're going to straighten their leg. They're going to put that foot in, tuck it into the thigh, and they're going to reach, right, for their toes. And they're aiming to get their nose on their shin, right? They're going to round like this. And that is what we're going to call a lower quality stretch, right? That is, I'm trying to get into a certain shape, and I'm going to press until I get there. Well, we're going to do things a little differently, because when we stretch well, flexibility comes from that. When we don't stretch well, injury comes from that. So stretching well, the reason for that is to broaden the fibers, right? To give them space to get longer and wider and, creating tiny little injuries so that it can knit back together and be longer. But when we're doing yoga, the intention is not to become more flexible. That's just kind of a side effect. So I think the first thing we have to do is ask, why do we want to become more flexible? Right? Is it for mobility? Great. Is it to look a certain way in a pose? Why do we really want to do that? Why does that matter? To me, yoga is how it feels, not how it looks. So I'm not interested in getting my nose on my shin, because that's just me pressing down and feeling an uncomfortable stretch in the back of my leg. Does not feel good. So what I'm going to do instead is plant my heel, and you can do this with me. Bend the knee, plant the heel, and then move the hip back and away from that. And as I do that, you'll notice I'm tipping because my pelvis is tilting forward. Right? So I'm actually pulling my hip back, and that's what straightens my leg. Now, instead of rounding like this, the pointy part of my pelvis in the front is closer to my thigh. And all of a sudden, that stretch feels much different. I don't know if you can feel that, but over time you will if you're not yet. So plant the heel, bend the knee, pull the hip back and away, even lifting it up off the ground to do so. And even you can use your hand just like on your sit bone to kind of feel that. Pull it back. Knee can stay bent. So it's more important that the pelvis and the thigh are closer together. And the top of my head is going to go forward. I'm not trying to press my nose down. So instead of going down like this, my hip goes back and my head goes forward towards my toes. All right, so just getting long that way. And that feels so different in the back of the leg. And that's the kind of stretch that's going to result in sustainable, feel-good yoga and real flexibility. So flexibility is the goal, okay, but it's kind of a side effect of just stretching well. So doing what feels good is actually going to result in flexibility instead of just trying to, press down. Which, by the way, when we round like this, not only are we not getting a great stretch in the back of the leg, we're rounding the spine and we risk pulling the back. No good. So that's Janu Shirshasana. We're going to do a few other poses to kind of demonstrate this concept and how to get really flexible. And when I say really flexible, I don't mean the most flexible. I mean, real flexibility. So one more time, we're going to press the heel into the ground, bend the knee, lift the hip up and pull it back as we tilt forward. Top of the head goes toward the toes, hip presses back. The hands can go on the ground out in front or maybe on the shin. And if the knee is bent and you're up here pulling the hip back, that's fine too. Head's going forward, hips going back. You don't have to be all the way down, not at all. Find what works in your body. So come on up and we'll change sides just to kind of balance that out. It's never fun to stretch just on one side. So we're going to plant the left heel, the right foot is in toward the thigh, knee is bent, and then we're going to pull that hip back as we tip forward. I don't know about you, but I'm tighter on this left side, so I'm going to leave my knee a little bit more bent, and I'm just going to press my chest forward. That's another great way to do forward folds. You can do the top of your head, but I also like to just press my sternum forward, and that flattens out the back and causes that pelvic tilt. You can press that chest forward, pull the hip back, nice high quality stretch in the back of the leg. So your teacher may or may not cue it that way, but now you know, so you can do it in the healthy way. And sometimes in a flow class, there's just not time to get into all that, right? That was a lot of stuff. And if you're just going to do, Janu Shirshasana, your teacher's going to say, right leg out, left foot in, and fold forward. But now you know to bend the knee, pull the hip back, press the chest or the top of the head forward, and get that fabulous stretch back there. So another great way to demonstrate this is in a standing forward fold. So we're going to do that next. So come on up onto your feet. And a great way to do this is to start kind of in a crouched position. So in a bit of a squat. Here you can press your fingertips into the ground and just start to lift the hips. And leave your knees as bent as they need to be to just kind of comfortably tilt forward so the top of the head goes toward the ground. Knees can be significantly bent here. So now your pelvis, the pointy part of your pelvis and your thighs are probably touching. So your belly is probably on your thighs. That's exactly where you want to be. You should feel a nice stretch in the back of the legs. If it feels like too much, bend the knees more. But same thing, we're going to tilt the sit bones up toward the sky and let that be what starts to straighten the legs. Because what a lot of folks do is they'll come into a forward fold with straight legs and then round like this. Just reaching for the toes, trying to get their nose closer to their knee. And that's pulling the back, and the backs of the legs don't feel good like that. So bend the knees deeply, tilt the pelvis so that the sit bones go up toward the sky, top of the head pressing toward the ground, and sit bones up to the sky. So it's a long line, just pressing away from each other. Now you've got that great broadening stretch in the back of the legs. Take a couple of deep breaths here. We're not warmed up today, so there's a couple of ways to get a great stretch, right? And warm the muscles to stretch them out healthily. You can warm them up and get super warm and then stretch them out. Another way is to breathe deeply into them. So imagining those muscles getting broader and longer as you breathe deep and slow. Because more than you'd think, stretching is a matter of trust. It's your body trusting your mind. And so you build that over the course of a yoga practice, and that's where that mobility comes from. So bend deep into the knees. We're going to come back down to the ground. That's good stuff, right? All right, so we're going to do next a wide-legged forward fold. So this time, bring your legs into a V shape. They don't have to be super far apart. They can be wherever's comfortable. If it feels better to place something under the knees, go ahead and do that. All right. So this kind of forward fold, now we don't have the advantage of sort of pressing the foot and the hip away from each other. But here we're going to do a similar thing in that we're going to tilt the pelvis forward. So again, we see a lot of people in a wide-legged forward fold rounding and reaching, right? And pulling the back and not getting much of a great stretch in the legs. Doesn't feel good. So to get that to feel good, you actually want to roll onto the front of the pelvis. So place your hips, or place your hands, place your hips, place your hands kind of in the little nook right there of your hips. And then start to press your chest forward and bring everything with you. So start to press your chest forward, bend your knees if that feels better. And you should start to feel like you're rolling onto the front of your sit bones, onto the front of the pelvis. And that's what we're going for, right? So that may not feel super great. You can press your fingertips into the ground behind you. And again, press your chest forward. And so the whole works is tilting rather than rounding, right? So think of it as sticking your butt out. Stick your butt out behind you. Press the chest forward so you've got this nice long spine. And that's your wide-legged forward fold. Fingertips can stay behind, pressing the chest forward. You should feel a nice stretch in the inner thigh. Again, knees can be bent. And you go to a yoga class and you see everybody just drops down like this, you know, and they're like, oh, well, that's what I'm supposed to do. But some people are just made in a way that allows them to be more flexible and more than others, right? So our anatomy dictates how far we're going to go in this pose. For instance, I've been doing yoga for 20 years. I've been doing this pose a very long time. I do not go flat onto the floor. No way. The way my bones fit together is not going to allow that. So we're rolling the pelvis forward, pressing the chest, getting a nice stretch there. Breathe again into that and just sort of imagine, it's kind of a mind over matter thing. Imagine the fibers and the muscles getting longer and wider. And that's what we mean when we say breathe into it. It's like you take a deep breath and imagine the breath going into that area. And then as you exhale, let it release and relax. You're sort of building trust between the tissues and your mind. And you can gain a lot of flexibility that way. I'm just hanging out here because it feels awesome. So we'll roll back now. And before we leave this pose, we're going to add a little side bend to it, because that's often what we do when we arrive here. So we'll talk a little bit about side stretching as well. But before I go over toward the right, I'm going to bend my knee. Right? That's always before folding in a direction with the legs, bend the knee. Because if I just try to go this way, I might round. Just like I don't want to round forward, I don't want to round to the side either, because I can pull my waist doing that. It misaligns the spine and you can hurt yourself doing that. If you bend the knee, it kind of encourages the pelvis to tilt that way. Just like we tilt it forward, we want to tilt the pelvis this way. So you bend the knee and kind of give that relief. Now I can place my hand down or maybe my elbow to the inside of the knee. I'm going to leave that knee bent for now and then reach my left arm up toward the sky. I don't know about you, but I already feel a nice stretch right there. So if that's it, that's it. You can hang out right there, and that's all. So we don't need to try to get the hand on the foot and do that whole thing. Right? We're just going to hang out here. Maybe reach that arm overhead. But real importantly in the side stretch is to turn the heart up toward the sky. So I'm actually pressing my elbow into my knee and turning up. Right? And you'll notice you'll feel a higher quality stretch in your side waist. Just breathe into that. Continuously turning up. So I'm almost twisting toward the left. I never grab my foot in this pose. Some people do because they're super flexible, but I find that misaligns my spine. So I just hang out here, stretching into the side waist. And then we'll come on up and we'll take that to the other side. So bending the left knee, elbow goes down either to the floor or maybe just press the hand there. Reach the right arm up toward the sky. Maybe it goes overhead. Now you can leave that knee bent. If you're feeling a stretch, you're doing it, you're done, right? Just hang out there. If you don't feel much of a stretch, which I don't on this side, I'm gonna start to straighten the leg, but as I do so, I'm tilting the pelvis more, right? So I'm just closing that angle between my pelvis and my thigh. I'm just sort of pulling my right hip over toward the right. And again, twisting to turn up. Deep breaths. And then come on up. Before I learned that turning up, when I go over toward the right side, I would always feel a tweak in my spine, sort of a scary little tweak. And then I was in a class, my teacher, Ian Finn, grabbed my wrist and pressed my back so that I pressed up and turned. And it was like, oh, that's how that's supposed to go. All right, so that's it for our side stretches, but just always remember that. And we'll do a couple more and one more where we're actually bending to the side and we'll twist up like that. So bring the knees in. We've been in a wide fold for a little bit, so maybe windshield wipe the knees back and forth to kind of counterpose that. All right, and then we'll come on up onto our feet. And we're just going to do 2 more poses and then we'll wrap it up for today. So we're going to do triangle pose. Let the feet go nice and wide. I'm going to turn the right foot out and I'm facing the side of the mat, right? So in triangle pose, what we see a lot is that we start with a straight leg and we place the right hand down and then sort of round the spine like this. And I'm trying to do it actually how I see people do it. So I'm going to not do it the right way. So the pelvis stays where it is, hand goes down, arm goes up, kind of rounding the spine toward the right. And again, we don't want to round, right? So think pelvic movement in all of these. Not surprising by now, that's what we want to do. So I'm actually going to shift my hips toward the left. So go ahead and do that. And now what you've got, you'll start to notice you start to turn slightly toward your front foot. And you can even bring your left hip forward a little bit, and that'll sort of help that happen. So again, that pointy part of the pelvis gets closer to the thigh, and that's what we're going for. So that shift, as I kick the left hip out, allows me to kind of reach long and now place the hand down. Bend that knee. Because we're going to do the same thing we were doing in other forward folds. You place your hand on your shin. You can also go all the way down to the foot if you've got that kind of range of motion. Let your left arm go up toward the sky and then straighten the leg by pulling the left hip toward the end of the mat, right? So you're going to shift that way. If the knee stays bent, that's okay. We're not going for a particular shape or try to look like anybody else, right? Do what feels good. So you should feel a nice stretch under the leg. The only reason to straighten the leg is if you don't feel much of a stretch, right? So pulling the hip back, and if the left hip came forward, now you can sort of draw that back as you twist up toward the sky. So just like we were doing in that side bend on the ground, we're turning the heart up. And that's your triangle pose. And you'll notice that your side waist is pretty flat, right? There's no rounding toward the side. We've kicked that hip way out. And you come up as high as you need to. If your hand is on your thigh, and that's as far as you're able to tilt, that's where you're at. That's your triangle pose. And it may change over time, or it may not, because we're all different. And that's triangle. So we'll come on out of that. Shake that out a little bit. And let's do the other side for balance. So left foot toward the left, wide-legged stance. Start with a bent knee. Hand starts to go down the thigh, and we're going to kick the right hip out. All right, so we're bringing that pelvis closer to the thigh. Right arm goes up. Nice flat side waist. Deep breaths. Now the other thing we'll work on in triangle pose is the top of the head going away from the hips, right? So get super long in this horizontal line, as well as long from your left hand to your right. So you just sort of get nice and expansive through all of your endpoints. And that's triangle pose. And then release and come on up. Now turn toward one end of your mat, right foot forward. If you can do it without stumbling. Right foot forward, left foot back, and we'll take pyramid pose. And this will be our last one. But you'll start to notice that there is this definite pattern here with forward folds, right? So we're going to start with a bent knee, as we always do. We're pressing that front foot into the ground. Both feet are pretty parallel. You can kind of step your left foot out so you're nice and balanced. And start to lean forward with that bent knee. And then we're going to pull the hips back, and that's what straightens the knee. So as it gets towards straight, and you can place your hands on your shin. And you're going to keep that knee bent, and you're going to reach the crown of the head forward as the hips pull back. And you've got that nice high quality stretch in the back of that leg. And you can hang out there. If you've got more range of motion, your body's asking for more, you can keep pulling that hip back. Maybe the hands come down to the ground. If they do, press the fingertips into the ground and pull that hip back even more as the crown of the head goes forward. And that's your high quality pyramid pose. Deep breaths. One more. Now bend into that knee and come on up. And we'll just switch sides. So turning it around toward the left. And in a flow class, again, you're not going to get that kind of time. So you have to sort of practice in this way so that when you get cued to do pyramid pose, it may go as fast as this. So your teacher may say, start to, left foot out, right foot back, and fold into pyramid pose, right? It's that quick. And so what you're going to do is bend your knee, pull your hip back, crown of the head forward. And in your brain, you go, that's a fold, right? That's how we fold. So do that now, and you can step your foot back if that feels a little better. Keep the knee bent, crown of the head forward, hip pulling back as you press that foot into the ground. Deep breaths. And then come on up. And then bring the feet together and we'll sit down. And this isn't a flow class, but I feel like we need a little something to kind of close that out. So we're going to do butterfly pose or Baddha Konasana. So bottoms of the feet together, knees go out to the side. Same thing, right? Hips go back. So you can kind of rock back and forth to let the pelvis tilt forward. Chest presses forward. You can keep the fingertips behind, or maybe they come out in front. And just start to lean into that with the chest going forward. Again, we're not rounding, right? And just let gravity do its thing. Maybe close the eyes. Each breath, maybe you come a little bit deeper into the pose. Tilting the pelvis forward so you're kicking those sit back bones out behind you. Press the chest forward. High quality stretch. Outer legs this time. Maybe a little in the inner. And then walk the hands back up. Come into a simple cross-legged position. And we'll close it out there. So I know this may have been a little unorthodox, maybe not what you're used to, but this kind of way of working in yoga revolutionized my practice, and I hope it does yours as well. helps you avoid injury and really get that long-term sustainable flexibility rather than forcing into sort of tearing fibers. We're getting a high quality stretch that feels better, which allows us to really get into the yoga practice, which is connecting mind and body. And then the side effect is more mobility. So yay. So thanks for watching and joining me. I'll catch you next time. Thanks for joining me. If you enjoyed today's class, come find me over on lcyoga.com. There you'll find all kinds of content that doesn't exist here on YouTube. With a 30-day free trial, you'll find commercial-free complete beginner series, intermediate flows, workshops, at-home retreats, challenges, lots of stuff to help you grow and expand your practice. So start your 30-day free trial at lcyoga.com and I'll see you there.